I was at the Harvard Business School doing leading global businesses recently, and thought a lot about this because one of the case studies we worked on was a guy called Ron Johnson, who was phenomenally successful with Target and then phenomenally successful with Apple. And then he got to JC Penney and just absolutely crashed. So it's a great question that you've asked, because I've been thinking about this for a while. And I guess I've been really fortunate to have some incredibly moments professionally. If I had to pick a couple, I think two that I would share with you is one, was working at Bank of Melbourne, so launching a whole new bank brand for Victoria, which is a state in Australia, and it was called For the Makers. It took us a long time to get it to market, but just how rewarding it was once we got it there, and how much it resonated with the audience. That was really rewarding. If I had to pick another to do with more recent times, I think the last 3 years that I've spent at Mercer in Pacific has been really rewarding, Joe. When I joined, our marketing handshake was broken. We didn't have a strong brand presence in the marketplace. We didn't have the right marketing capability. We had fragmented processes and campaigns, and they weren't really connected to the business. So over 3 years, we built one of the highest performing marketing teams. And I guess globally at Mercer, it's also one of the strongest, which has made me really proud. We went from 2016 marketing generated revenue of 300,000 to, 2019 when I finished up, and we're at 3.1 million. So that's been really rewarding. We've got a really strong brand in the market. We've got team members who have been promoted, team members who have gone overseas. So for me, that's what matters most when it comes to, not that we achieve these great numbers, but the fact that the team cares passionately about each other and the work that they're doing. I'd much rather that than a toxic culture, to be honest, Joe. So team culture and I guess success is really important.
No, I think it makes sense to have that combination of, I guess, business results as well as kind of the team culture. And I think, honestly, knowing you and kind of your business acumen and background, I don't see you crashing anytime soon. Knock on wood.
Touch wood, Joe. Very different market.
Touch wood, yeah. So hopefully, that'll continue to soar high. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, obviously, along the road, you've had many achievements. There had to be some kind of obstacles or challenges along the way. Can you share more about kind of the biggest hurdles you faced in your career and how you overcame those?
Yeah. God, I've had many, so many. But I never really look at them, Joe, as failures. I always see them as a misstep for me, because I just think it's one of those things that I have another opportunity to do it better next time. If I really had to think about a failure, for me, the ones that have impacted me the most, or the ones where I think I've learned the most, has been to do with people and teams. I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm absolutely passionate about building teams and building high-performing teams with a great culture that the business is, the business envies. So sometimes where my biggest failures have been is, I might have seen some talent and that person might have not been ready, and I've pushed them too hard, or I've pushed them too soon, and I think that hasn't worked out for me really well in some cases. And so for me, I feel those failures more than I feel missing a target or making a mistake in a campaign. So yeah, that for me would be some of my more personal failures have been around people and teams.
And I think that makes sense. I kind of feel the same way as well. And honestly, when I do a lot of these interviews, a lot of the times the challenges don't really come from the business per se. It's about kind of managing relationships, both internally and externally. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to find out, a lot of the times, maybe junior or mid-level managers, one of their biggest challenges is really getting buy-in from the leadership team, like yourself, on initiatives that take a little bit longer to see kind of results. So you think of things like content marketing, social media marketing, and the like. So maybe what are some of your advice for getting that kind of buy-in from a leadership team on those kind of activities?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I haven't really had that issue, but I know that some of my friends and certainly some people I've spoken to have asked me about that. I think the first step is to actually speak the business language.
Mm,
So the business doesn't really care what the content, sorry, I will come back to that content question. The business doesn't care what piece of content you're producing, video, podcast, whatever it is you're producing.
mm,
What they're wanting to know, are some really basic things, Joe. How will this engage the clients I want to talk to? And what will be the result? What revenue are you going to generate for me?
mm,
So I don't try and talk to them about, we're going to get this many likes or this many clicks or things like that.
mm,
I try and position the content or the work that we do that takes longer, because we're not selling widgets in B2B marketing.
yeah.
I try and talk to them about establishing a point of view, a
Mm,
consistent point of view. And we do that by creating content. And whether that content is a point of view that you write, whether it's a video that we create together, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a conference, each one of those points, not in isolation, will create a really strong point of view that creates a brand halo for us.
mm,
So that's how I talk to them, as opposed to, if you did this video for me, we'd get like 15 likes or 100 likes.
yeah.
They don't understand that. And so when I talk to them about content marketing, I never talk about a piece in isolation. I never talk about just a campaign. I talk about the fact that, if you want someone to remember your brand, brand awareness and consideration all the
Mm,
time, you
yeah.
have to be consistent all the time. You can't be in market for 3 minutes and then decide, I've got really nothing to say for the next 3 months, and then decide all of a sudden I've got something to say.
Mm,
So teaching our executives, and that just comes from education. Not everyone knows that we're in marketing. So this is our job, is to educate on
mm,
things like this, educating that we're not selling a widget. So if I needed, if I needed a telephone, I'd go out and buy a telephone, because there's really only two things and it's really tangible. But if I'm
mm,
selling a service, Joe, it's about, what's your point of view? How do I know I can trust you over another service provider?
mm,
So yeah, that's how I tend to talk to marketers, and that's how I ask them to think about the long game rather than the short term, get me 100 clicks or get me 100 likes.
mm.
Yeah.
So firstly, I love that answer, and I think it's very unique, to be honest. I think a lot of marketers, particularly in Asia, are very short term in their mindset. They want thinking on a campaign basis or a quarterly basis. And it makes sense if you're in a kind of a listed company where you have to report on a quarterly basis, but a lot of the time they lose sight of the bigger picture. So I love that you constantly have that in mind. You're not really worrying about, okay, what kind of likes we get on this specific post, because as you rightly said, kind of the management team, the leadership doesn't really care about that. They care about, how do we build something that's sustainable and long term? And that doesn't really happen overnight. It doesn't really happen on a quarter basis. So I love that you are thinking in the long term, and then also the education piece about educating, the team internally, maybe the leadership team. I think that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, is just kind of educating executives on what is it, how is it going to impact the organization, and kind of changing mindsets that this is something that can have a bigger impact over the long term. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Pleasure. Do you mind if I give you one more example? But
Yeah.
this is with a client, and this is why I keep pushing this. And I often use this example is because one of our biggest clients that we signed up 2 years ago, bought $5.3 million worth of consulting from us. And I was really lucky in that we got a chance to sit together at dinner one night. So we had a conference, and then we were sitting together. But one of the things I said to this client is, what made you choose us over all these competitors? What made you choose to come with us? And he actually said to me, I looked through all of your digital assets. I looked through your website, your social media, your LinkedIn, your Twitter. And over time, what I saw was the same values and the same things that we shared as a company with you. So he didn't say, I looked at your Twitter or LinkedIn and, you had 100 likes and that's why you had 3,000 followers
Yeah.
and that's why I bought from you. He said, what I saw over time with your content and the things that you posted aligned with what my company values and what I wanted our culture to be like. And so that's why we chose you. So that's why I keep trying to tell that story to as many marketers as possible, because I think we often forget that the important things to a client isn't what's important to us as a marketer.
Exactly. No, I think that's an incredible story for a couple of different reasons. Obviously, the fact that you're taking the time to ask your client these questions. A lot of times we don't. We think in silos, or at least a lot of marketers do. So I love that you're having that interaction. And it's a good example of, like you said, having consistent values, a consistent voice, and actually generating, a substantial amount of revenue for the organization. So I think that is something that kind of clearly highlights that you're not just doing this for the sake of it. It does have an impact, but then you're very clear in terms of the focus. So I actually really, really love that example. I'll be happy to share it as well, because I think a lot of marketers need to hear it.
Excellent.
These are all great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate it. Now, Natalie, we talked about, education, and, you have been a digital marketing instructor in the past. So I'm keen to find out how important, you already mentioned the importance, but what are some of the practical L&D tips that you have learned over the years, maybe within the leadership team or the team in general?
You've touched on one of my passion points, Joe. You might have to edit this a bit more. I love this. So I've always been passionate about learning and development, both professionally, personally. Anyone that's been in my team will know that, it's part of our KPIs at Mercer, which is fantastic, but it's certainly a big part of team for me. Every year I encourage every single person in my team to attend a conference, attend courses or attend something that is of interest to them that will help develop them as a marketer or help the business in some way. I think it's absolutely critical. If you think that you've done a degree and, 3 years out, let alone 10 years out, and you haven't done anything else since then, you're just fooling yourself. You're kidding yourself if you think that you're not being left behind. So I have a personal philosophy on it. Every year, without fail, although this year might be a bit tricky with the virus.
Yeah.
I'm struggling a bit this year, but let's see how we go. Every year, without fail, I attend a conference of some sort, or a major course. Every 2 to 3 years, I always try and enroll in either postgrad or executive education. As I mentioned earlier, I did Harvard this year, a course called Leading Global Businesses, and absolutely loved it. And just reminded me about my geekiness in terms of learning about other companies and getting different perspectives from people. I absolutely thrive in it. And I couldn't encourage marketers, young, old, senior, junior, to go out and do the same.
So I love that for a couple of different reasons. I think the fact that you are encouraging your team to go out there and learn something new, I think it's particularly important in digital marketing where everything is changing almost every day. The fact that you're leading by example, so that you in fact are intending executive education programs, online courses, and things like that. And also you have KPIs set in place such that, it's part of their performance review, let's say. I'm actually going to be doing some lecturing coming up for one of the top universities in the world. And it's one of those things that I'm kind of in a similar kind of wavelength, that education is very important. And I've seen it across different organizations as well. I've seen the ones that really grow over time are the ones, like you said, that invest in their people, that are giving them the opportunity to learn on a regular basis. And you can see that in terms of things like retention, in terms of their performance over the long term. So I love that that is one of your passion points. It's one of mine as well. So I'm glad we have that in common.
When you teach, Joe, please say to, the marketers or the people you're teaching, if they happen to end up with a leader that doesn't encourage them to do learning and development, they should walk away. They shouldn't work for them. Those leaders do not deserve marketers that, are hungry and passionate about learning. So I always say that to my, if your leader or your people manager or your team leader doesn't support your learning and development, why would you bother working for them?
Yeah, no,
Don't work for them. Find someone else to work for.
find someone else. Exactly. There's always enough kind of fish in the sea. And I think that's really good advice. Like I said, if someone's not supporting your longer term career journey, whether it be L&D or other kind of support, I'm with you. Just
Yeah.
see ya.
Yep.
Because if they're good enough, they're gonna join somewhere eventually, and just a matter of time. So it's good advice. I'll keep that in mind for all the students to eventually find a leader that supports you or jump ship, find someone else.
Yep. Agree.
Awesome. So Natalie, you talked about kind of your approach to building relationships with existing customers, asking questions and things like that. Now, a lot of the times as marketers, we're so hungry to acquire new customers, but a lot of times we end up neglecting our existing ones. So maybe you can share a bit more in terms of how you and the team are kind of nurturing your existing relationships, maybe growing some of those existing accounts.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna have to admit to you, I don't think we do it very well at the moment, Joe. I think, we do, aside from the general nurturing that we do with, some client events and, we'll send them updates on new perspectives and new point of views that we have. But to be honest, I'm not happy with where we're at right now with that. I can certainly tell you about a company where I worked with, where I thought they did it really well. So I worked with, I think, in general, private banks generally do it well. So I worked for a company called ANZ Private Bank in Australia. And I think it's one of the very few companies that I've ever worked for that have done the whole nurturing and retention piece really well. So there was quite an even split between, cross-selling, upselling to existing clients and then new business as well. So I think, but we're certainly nowhere near doing it well yet, Joe, that I'd be proud of.
Yeah, well, I mean, regardless, I think the fact that you've even admitted that is huge. A lot of people will be like, yeah, we're doing phenomenal stuff. We're in the back end, your customers are like, not really. So the fact that you've taken that first step and saying, look, there might be an opportunity for us to improve is usually the first step in change. So the fact that you're putting yourself out there is great. And yes, I think to your point, a lot of companies don't really do this because, there's that excitement of winning a new client, not so much in renewing one a lot of the time. So you get really excited, we start celebrating when we get a new contract. But then when we renew one with a big client, we're like, oh yeah, that's, So it's the whole kind of mindset that we need to change in terms of really, really developing and nurturing relationships. And I know some teams, so there's a tech organization that I worked with recently, and they have a team just dedicated to their key accounts. And so they spend a lot of time in providing, additional consulting, training, resources, because they know that without these, it's going to have a detrimental impact to the business. So they have specific resources in place to really help nurture those relationships, not only when they sign the contract, but also in the longer term. So I think some organizations that do that, but to your point, I think a lot don't, and really missing out on a huge opportunity there. So, like I said, you took the first step by bringing it up. So I think that's a kudos to you and everyone watching to admit where there are gaps in the organization. Can't be good at everything.
Look, certainly, Joe, from an organizational perspective, when it comes to global clients, I know we do it well. I have to admit, from a marketing perspective, we certainly don't do it well enough yet, and certainly not to a point where I can proudly talk about it. So yes, it's definitely an area of improvement for us.
And that's a good point, because I think a lot of times things like this are where marketing and sales really come in together, because sales will be responsible for obviously renewing the contracts, and they'll generally need, maybe 3 to 6 months of headway before then from the marketing team saying, okay, how do we engage them through different events, through different resources or different kind of specific training to them, so such that when the sales team is ready to have that conversation for renewals, they're already in a good place. So I think it's really important that marketing and sales are working together to identify what are some of the key accounts, what are some of the challenges they're having, and how can marketing support that in terms of education or specific resources, so that the sales guys, when they're ready, can easily close the deal.
Yep.
That's just
agree.
experience.
No, I mean, that's what makes a great marketing handshake, isn't it, Joe? I mean, that's what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And like I said, I don't think, I mean, it's age-old battle, marketing and sales. The most effective marketing or organizations I've seen are those that work very much, like you said, handshake or hand in hand with each other, because when you don't, then you, obviously there's a lot of issues on the revenue side. So glad that you recognize it as well. Most marketers do not. So once again, you're already ahead of the curve in front of most. Now, Natalie, you have mentioned that in a previous life, or sorry, in another life, you would be a professional foodie reviewer, but only for good restaurants. Now, coincidentally, that's how I started my career in China, as I was a food critic. So I'm really keen to find out what has been your favorite restaurant in Asia. And I know that's a tough, very tough question, probably the toughest I've asked, but I would love to get your thoughts on it.
Oh wow, that is a tough question, and I have to be really honest here. I don't think I've spent enough time in Asia to do this enough justice, Joe. But in in the last 12 months, my time in Asia, I've been back and forth between Australia and Asia 4 or 5 times. I love Peking duck, so I'd have
Oh,
to say, yeah, Imperial Treasure probably in Singapore is one of my favorites for that. I think if I had to pick something in Hong Kong, I'd say Ho Lee Fook is magnificent. The food, the energy, the environment is great. But in all honesty, there's probably going to be a bunch of people that disagree with you on this, or disagree with me and comment on this. But I actually just love wandering the streets of Asia. I didn't grow up eating that way. I mean, I grew up mostly in Australia. So I love wandering the streets in Asia and just tasting food from the street. I loved, one of the things that I love at the moment, which I'm craving and I can't get back to Hong Kong at the moment, is the egg waffles on the street.
oh gosh.
I could eat those. Yeah, I could eat those for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Oh,
But I might have to take a rain check on that question, Joe, and come back to you.
all right. So, I mean, you've already given, I mean, I've been in Asia for 13 years, and I can tell you as someone who's been to nearly all the countries and had probably too much food than I should have, is I also love the Peking duck and those egg waffles
Yeah.
in Hong Kong. Actually, the first time I went to Hong Kong, I was with my friend who was a local, and he took me around, and so the Hong Kongese are very hospitable, and I literally gained, I think, like 5 or 6 kilos in a week because we would eat like every hour. It was like you said, we were walking on the street and we're like, oh, that looks good. He's like, try it. He's like, that looks good. Like, try it. So I remember seeing photos of me at the beginning of the trip and then afterwards. And I'm like, I don't think I could ever live here because I would just balloon up. I would just be eating nonstop. So yes, I definitely know how you feel with a lot of the street food, and particularly in Hong Kong, it's really amazing.
Well, it's good to know that you've managed to lose that weight. I've certainly got some friends over there that have said to me, I piled on 6 kilos in the first 12 months and still haven't lost it. So well done to you for losing it.
It's a process. It's an everyday thing. Just gotta keep it up. But yes, anyway, thing. Well, Natalie, thank you so much for all of your insights and inspirations today. Really, really appreciate it. If people are watching, how can they get in touch with you or kind of follow your developments?
Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm really happy to chat to anyone. I think, I love meeting people that are starting out, emerging, or people that have had a career change into marketing. And I'm happy to chat to anyone. I really think that the world, I found marketing as my passion. I actually started out as a process analyst, Joe, believe
Wow,
it or not.
sexy.
Yeah, and found marketing my passion. But outside of that, I love building teams. So I love people, and so I'm really happy to connect on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter, so look for me in all those places.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Natalie. And if you enjoyed Natalie's interview today, please feel free to share it with your colleagues or anyone else who might find it helpful. Otherwise, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on A Cup of Joe. Take care and have a good one.